So I was hunting for Darth Dawkins the other day, and I didn't find him, but I did find somebody else, and we had a little fun. Let's get into it.
Mr. Anderson.
Hi, my name is Mr. Anderson, and I am mean to people on the internet. I'm always very polite about it, though. I just tend to ask difficult questions and insist on the answers. It shouldn't be a big surprise because I am, in fact, a lawyer. On my channel, you'll find a lot of stuff to do with debate. Basically, you can think of my channel as kind of like a self-defense course for getting into fights on the internet. I kind of specialize in cross-examination and adapting a lot of those cross-examination skills and other skills that we use as lawyers to try and make people face difficult facts and not run from questions. And so I kind of adapt those so that you can use those in your own debates and in your own life if you need to. Now, a lot of my debates center around science-related claims, but every once in a while I like to step outside of that wheelhouse and get into talking with different kinds of people, and in this case we're talking about presuppositionalists. Presuppositionalists are people who are typically religious fundamentalists, usually Christians, who think that unless you believe in God that you can't know anything and that they have access to truth and that you don't. And one of the most prominent presuppositionalists out there is a guy named Darth Dawkins. Nobody knows what he looks like. Actually, I think he might have accidentally shown his face recently, but we're not going to out him like that. His avatar is like a picture of like Richard Dawkins, but wearing a Darth Vader helmet. He is. I mean, he's got some skill in asking questions and sort of putting people off balance and trying to, instead of justify God, he tries to make atheists justify not God. Here, I'll give you an example.
You're just interrupting me again. Okay? The reason why I'm interjecting with you is because you're just wasting time.
Sorry for interrupting you in the middle of my
Yeah,
sentence.
listen, dude, you're just wasting time. This is what you atheists do all the time. You want to quibble over an operational definition. You have a title in your page, God is a myth. Okay? Does that term God there include a singular ground of all being that's a mind?
Sure.
Okay, good. So then we're done with the definition.
No, we're not, because that doesn't say anything about whether I have a positive belief in the matter or not.
No, do you have a belief that God defined as the creator does not exist, or do you suspend judgment?
I think it would be really fun to have a little conversation with him. So, Darth, if you see this, or if anybody, runs into him, let him know I'm interested in having a chat with the guy. Anyway. There is another YouTuber who is an up-and-comer and whose channel is growing very rapidly. He's an interesting character. His name is Breakfast Tacos. We'll just call him Taco. He's a nice guy. And he is also a mod on a server on Discord that this Darth Dawkins guy likes to hang out on. So he kind of, shepherded me and took me under his wing onto that mod and showed me the ropes, and we went into a channel looking for this guy, and we didn't find him, but we did end up finding somebody else who wanted to, have a little go around, and so I got my chance to sort of scratch the old itch, and this is what came out of it. So you're going to see Taco was the one who was kind enough to record all of this, because I haven't figured out how to record stuff on Discord yet. And you can see the full thing posted on his channel, which I'll link in the description. But this version is going to be more of an edited version with my analysis, as is kind of typical for my channel. And here we go.
Hi, I don't think we've met before. So I just wanted to be clear. So you'd say that, like, in a sense, when you're talking about God, we're talking about something that is beyond the universe, that has a mind of its own, right? Independent of the things in the universe?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think, are you sitting down right now?
Yes, sir. I'm sitting down in the chair.
Yeah, okay. That chair that you're sitting in, do you think that it has a mind of its own?
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
Do I think that the chair has a mind of its
Yeah,
own?
like a mind of its own. Like imagine, I mean,
Like,
it
what are we
could be,
defining as mind here? What do you mean
like
by
it could
mind?
be.
Because
I
now I don't
mean,
know what you mean.
here's what I mean is that it could be that that chair has thoughts and feelings, and but it just can't express them because it can't interact with the world. But it could have a mind. We can't rule that out. But I'm guessing that you don't think that your chair does have a mind of its own. Is that fair?
Uh, well, I don't believe that my chair has thoughts and feelings.
Okay, and that would be true of like pretty much anything that that we could look around and see, unless there's kind of evidence to the contrary. So, like, you think I have a mind of my own, right?
Well, sure, you have a. I mean, yeah, you have. I mean, it seems like you have thoughts or feelings because you're responding to me.
Right. And so, like, I mean, that's giving you evidence to believe that I have a mind of my own, right?
Would say that I would say well yeah, I mean I would say that I have some epistemic reasoning for believing that you have a mind.
Right. And when I don't know what epistemic reasoning is, I could think about it and figure
Like
it
you
out, but
have
So don't get confused by the philosophy speak here. Epistemic reasoning is just like a reason to think something. Epistemology is, or epistemology, is just like how you know what you know. So when he's saying like I have an epistemic reason, it's kind of redundant. He just means I have a reason to think something. But that's all he means.
it doesn't
not like
matter to me.
I
Like, I
have
mean, you have reason because
certain
you
beliefs and
can hear
knowledge,
me
like
talk and
because I like I know I would say like based off of what I believe and know and observed that I mean most or if not all humans have a mind, by the way, and this goes to show that people express
right,
themselves and people respond to me like you're responding to me right now. I don't have any
right.
reason to
So unless
believe
you
that my
hear,
bed has a mind.
right, but if there was like somebody with like a coma, who was in a coma, or maybe you don't even know they're in a coma, right? But they're in a hospital and they're not moving. As far as you know, they haven't moved in years. I mean, would you assume that that person has a mind of their own, or would you assume the opposite?
If they were in a coma, and if they I
Yeah,
mean if they're alive,
or
yeah, I would
apparently a
assume.
coma.
Well, yeah, again, because I believe, well, at least human beings that are alive have a mind or no. I wouldn't say, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
So you would assume that somebody in a coma has a mind of their own, even if they were unable to communicate, if they were being kept alive by machines and all those sorts of things. You would assume they still have a mind of their own.
Yeah, because I have reasoning to believe so.
Okay, and that reasoning basically is that it's a human, so therefore it's of a category that means that it has a mind of its own, and as a result, you would say, I would presume that it has a mind of its own based on the fact that it is breathing, that it is alive. Is that fair?
Yeah, you can say that.
You see what I did here, where he's groping towards what he means, right? Because these questions are kind of, they're new to him, right? He's thinking on his feet, and so I'm not forcing him to like try and come up with every little thing. I'm kind of helping him, with the logical extensions, and I'm not trying to be unfair or like, manipulate his answers. I'm just like honestly trying to sort of expand on and expound, and flesh out what it is he means. And the reason for that is kind of twofold. One is if we're kind of coming up with it together, then I mean, to some degree, I can make sure that he doesn't go off on a rabbit trail and try and derail the conversation. And the other is that like it's way faster. Like if you've ever like tried to kind of force somebody down a particular path and guide them and help them when they're not trying to be cooperative with you anyways, but also like not give them any kind of guidance or as to what it is you're looking for. It takes a long time. It's an extraordinarily frustrating process. So like helping the person to sort of understand what it is that you're looking for in a situation like this is helpful, and it speeds the process along and keeps things moving.
Okay. So if it's breathing and it's alive, those are external indicators that something has a mind of its own. Is that fair?
No, not necessarily.
No. And so in what sense then would you
I
say
don't
that
think.
if something is breathing, not if something is breathing and alive, you would still not say that it has a mind of its own?
Yeah, no, I don't think that something being alive and breathing is sufficient enough to say that something has a mind of their own, because I mean, plants breathe, right?
Right.
And I
And
don't
so
believe
you
they have
think
a mind of
plants
their
have
own.
minds of their, you think plants have minds?
I literally just told you. I literally just told you that I don't think that breathing and being alive is sufficient enough to say that something
Uh-huh.
that this being has a mind. I believe that there's
Okay.
other, like I said, uh, how people express themselves. This is a human being, right? And for
Right.
what I've observed and for what I've experienced in this life,
Mm.
I know that if not all human beings, like most human beings, if not all human beings, have a mind. Even if they're in a coma, they probably have a mind that they've used, or if not, they
Okay.
will use it.
Have you ever observed anything that is not alive, that doesn't eat and breathe and grow, give you any indication that it has a mind?
Um. Well, to be honest, I would say. I mean, I would say no. I have not. I have not observed anything that is dead or abiotic, that eat, grows, eat stuff like that. I wouldn't
Okay.
assume it has a mind.
And to your knowledge, does God eat or breathe or grow?
Does God eat, breathe, or grow? Well,
Yeah.
no, he doesn't. No, God doesn't change. That
Okay.
isn't.
So what makes
What
you
is your
think
point?
that God has a mind?
So here you can see that I asked the wrong kind of question, right? I caught myself, because that's not the right way to phrase that question. That is the point. That's what we're driving at, but it is not a kind of question that you're gonna get an answer to, because that's kind of a ponderable, right? And so, I mean, either he's going to like think about that for a while and then give some kind of a long soliloquy that it will take a whole bunch of time and energy to unpack, or he's just going to refuse to answer. It's not a good question. So you can see kind of how I reset and I go, "Oops, that was because I'm doing this on the fly, right?" And I go, "Whoops, no, that wasn't what I meant to say. That's not how I want to approach this. So watch how this goes."
Why is it different for God? Let me ask it that way. Why is it different for God? Because I'm sure you do believe that
Why is
God
it
has a
different for
mind,
God?
right? But you wouldn't do that for my chair or, or
I don't
anything
even
else.
think. I don't even think. Um. Number one. Uh. I don't even think that God is like. God isn't an organism.
Right?
He's living, but he's not
Yeah.
the material organism, right?
That's not
Uh-huh.
what he's saying, though. What he's saying is how you determine minds, right? And he's saying is you determine God has a mind, but yet you cannot use the same methodology you use to determine minds that you
It's not
use.
true. How did I determine minds? How did I determine minds?
So see, this guy here, while meaning, is kind of making the mistake that I almost made, where he's kind of going directly at kind of the point without sort of circling around and kind of building a cage around the guy so that he can't run away. And the guy's like, immediately clawing at the edges. And you can see how I kind of, okay, like let's wrangle this in, and now let's start building some walls first before we go in and have a cup of tea or whatever. However you want to make a tortured analogy about that.
He
Well,
just went
How
over
did I
from what we
determine whether or not something has a mind?
well, based on
Because
based on
yes,
what
I
we
believe.
talked about,
Yeah, go ahead.
what you told me before was that you typically what you do is you look at whether something is alive, and even if it's alive, that's not sufficient. But if it's not alive, then that's definitely kind of preclusionary. And so what you do typically is that you look at whether or not it's alive, and then if it is alive, then it might have a mind, but then it still has kind of some more tests to pass. And that's how you do it for
Well,
everything else, but not God.
yeah,
Is that
because
fair?
what is sufficient to have a mind, thoughts and feelings? I mean,
Right.
based off what I know,
Yeah.
believe, God has thoughts and feelings. Or
Right. But
God
you
has
don't have
thoughts.
any evidence to suggest that, like, is there more evidence to suggest God has thoughts and feelings than it does that your chair has thoughts or feelings? Because you won't make that assumption about your chair.
Well, again, based off of my epistemology, I know God has thoughts. God has feelings.
Right, I know, but your
This is
epistemology with
expressed.
respect to your epistemology with respect to what you know about God is different than your epistemology with respect to what you know about everything else, right?
So once again, guys, epistemology, it's just a big word that means his reasons for knowing things, right? So we're talking about his reasons of knowing that God has thoughts and feelings versus his reasons for knowing that his chair does not have thoughts and feelings. That's what we mean when we say his epistemology.
Well, I wouldn't assume. Well, so yeah, because I mean,
It
like,
is, yeah.
I'm not gonna assume my chair has a mind, right? But based off of my,
Uh-huh.
because number one, the argument that you're establishing, we're already, we're pre-assuming that God is out there. But you're asking me, how do I know God has a mind? Or yeah, you ask me why I believe God has a mind. This is expressed throughout what I believe, right? This is expressed throughout the scripture.
Yeah, you're
Scripture is
just
how
saying
I come to know God.
that's not the issue here, right? Is your epistemology is the study of how you know things, right? So outside of yourself, how do you know things? And you're saying is this mind is you have a mind, but you also determine other minds outside of yourself, and you have a way to determine that, how you know things, right? And
Yeah,
if
God
God
has
is
thoughts and
outside of
feelings.
if God is outside of you, right, and you're saying God has a mind, then you determined God has a mind. And he's basically asking you is how did you determine God has a mind, right? And
Through
by all of
yeah.
the things you've said before, how you determine a mind, you can't do with God. So really the question is how did you determine God has a mind without just defining him having a mind?
So this ally here who's jumped in is making a good point and making the correct point, but making it in the wrong way. And you can see that because that question it's combative, which is fine, but it's also very open-ended and it's ponderable again. And so it's not going to lead to like a responsive answer. It's going to lead to a long soliloquy that, it will get more frustrating, not less, if you try and get him to answer that question. And so I go for something that's quite a bit more modest and still just as devastating that I can actually get him to answer. So watch.
Or my question is actually even a little bit more modest than that. My question is just, it's true, isn't it, that when you do whatever it is that you do to determine whether God has a mind, that's special. That's different from the way that you do it with respect to everything else. You
It's
only
not special.
apply those. So you
It's the
use
same.
that same logic to determine whether or not
It's,
your chair has a mind
uh,
as God, or
So you can see what I did here that is similar but very, very importantly different from what my ally did is that I used what they call a leading question. And a leading question is a question where the answer is buried in the question, right? And, so I asked it in the kind of the form of, isn't it true that? And then I gave the answer. And so now you just have to think about whether or not you agree or not with the answer, and then the answer can pop out rather than a big open-ended question where you have to kind of go, what do I believe? And then you kind of think about it and you come up with an answer that could kind of come off the wall and come out of left field. So this answer has a lot more control, and you can see he kind of goes, no, right away. And so then I just kind of move on and I can question off the last answer much more easily in this situation.
Or what do you use the God one for other than God?
Yeah, so it's number one, like I said, my chair is not alive. God is alive. God has thoughts and feelings. Therefore, I can conclude that God has a mind.
Right, but
Yeah,
really
he's
what we're
asking you,
talking
how
about
did
is
you
whether or
determine
not,
that?
How do I
like
determine
whether,
that?
really what I want to
Through
know
what
is,
I believe.
you,
Through like
like, because you don't
that
think that your
is that
chair
is
has
what
thoughts and feelings, right? Do you think your chair has thoughts and feelings that
He
maybe
already
it just
answered
can't
that. He
express?
already answered that. He needs to talk about special
Yeah,
revelations. Scripture is
yeah.
how he believes.
So,
That's what
so
So what my ally doesn't appreciate here is that I remember that he did already answer that, but that's not the reason that I'm asking the question. The reason that I'm asking the question is that I'm trying to reframe, reset, and put him back on the path so that we can go down kind of a clear path together, right? So I want to go back, get the answer that I already got again, kind of basically pick him up, lead him back to the path, and then we walk down it. So that's the reason I'm asking that question again. He's quite right. The guy has already answered it. And he's also quite right that the guy then started to evade. And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to do what I call going around again, right? Where it's like, okay, ask this series of questions, and we got you to a point, and you kind of ran off, into the woods, right? So I go into the woods after you, I get you, I bring you back to the path. We kind of take a few steps that we've already taken, and then we try and move forward. And that was kind of the plan. That's the technique I'm using here.
yeah.
So
Like
you
I'm
don't think
saying,
your
like I'm
chair
not
has
like
thoughts and
you're. I
feelings,
think
but
you're
you do
making the
think God has
argument.
thoughts and feelings.
I think the argument that you're making is I did not witness, I guess, these thoughts and feelings. How do I know that God really has a mind?
All I wanted to know is, so you'd agree with me that the way that you decide whether or not your chair has thoughts and feelings is different than the way that you decide whether God has thoughts and feelings, right?
No, I don't. I don't think it's different. I think it's the same, right? I assume based off of what I know about this chair, I know this chair doesn't have. It's not alive. So how can I even assume that it even like it doesn't even have the condition to I guess to even
What
have a mind in the first place, right?
what are the
No, God is
conditions?
So,
alive.
oh, hang on, I got this. So, uh, so we talked before about, the things that you would look for when you were trying to determine whether or not something had a mind. You would look at whether or not it breathed and whether or not it was alive. And even then, that's not enough. It would have to be giving you some positive sort of indications that it had thoughts and feelings, right? Is that fair?
And there you see it again. Now I'm circling around again from a different angle because the first one kind of got derailed. I mean, which happens all the time, both, for many different reasons in lots of different circumstances, right? So you can't just kind of, go around in a rut and do the exact same thing again, but I'm using the same technique in a different way. We're going around, we're saying, remember what we said before, we agreed on this, let's get back on our path, and now we're going to move forward.
Well, yeah, I never said that something. But yeah, I never said. I'm not saying because God is alive that's sufficient enough to prove to me. Okay, yo, he has a mind. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that. What I
Right.
am
But
saying
God,
now,
in
what
terms
I'm
of
saying now.
God being alive, in terms of God being alive, like God doesn't eat or breathe or grow.
They breathe and eat and grow. And that is how you know. Uh-oh, yeah, they're alive.
Right? So he's not alive in that sort of traditional sense, is he?
Well, yeah, he's not alive in the biological sense because he's not like this physical thing. No,
Right. So he would then be more akin to the chair than he would be to the coma patient, even, right?
no.
No?
You sure about that?
What
Wait,
makes
can
him
you repeat?
more
Can
like
you
the
repeat that?
coma patient than the chair?
Well, he's not like either.
Well, I know that, but what is he more like? Is he more like the chair or more like the coma patient? Because I mean, both the chair and God are made of things that are not alive in the biological sense, right?
Whenever these guys feign ignorance about being able to figure out whether a thing is alive or not, I'm always reminded of Sesame Street show that I saw I don't know when I was a kid, where they talk about how you can figure out whether things are alive or not. It just floors me that people, pretend to struggle with the basic issue of like, is this thing alive? Is that thing alive? I mean, like if we get down to like the edges where we're talking about like, is a virus alive? I can understand the concern, but when we're talking about is God alive in the biological sense, and is a chair alive in the biological sense? I mean, I don't really understand why this is so difficult for them. So I always think this is kind of funny.
Well, a rock's not alive. No, 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 no. And a clock's not alive. No, 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 no. A telephone's not alive. No, 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 no. An ice cream cone's not alive. No, 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 no.
God is made of things that are not alive? What? No, I don't
In the
believe.
biological sense. In the biological sense.
No, I mean, no, I don't believe. I mean, God isn't made up of. I mean, he's immaterial. He's not really. He has
Right.
properties, attributes, but he's not. He's not composed of like physical matter and stuff like that. So I don't know what you mean by
Right.
that.
Right. Okay. So you're saying God is more like an idea than he is like a chair or like a coma patient.
An idea? I don't think God is an
Yeah,
idea.
something that's not made up of you. I didn't say he was. I said that to you he's more like an idea. He's more similar to an idea than he is to a chair or a coma patient. Is that fair? He's a living idea in your mind.
I don't know what you mean when you say. I mean, more like no. I would. I don't even know what that means, to be honest. I don't know what you're asking me.
So what I was asking him was whether or not God kind of belongs to the category of things that don't require physical proof, like ideas, or whether he belongs to the category of things that manifest in the real world, like things. But he, wasn't getting that. He wasn't picking up that sort of reference. And so what you do is you change gears, you attack that idea from a different angle, and you'll see that I do that quite a bit here in this little debate.
What I'm asking you is whether or not. Okay, so let me ask you this. First of all, is God physical?
No.
Okay, and is an idea something that's physical?
Oh, an idea is something that's not. It's not physical.
Okay, and so in that sense, both God and an idea have that in common. Is that fair?
Sure.
Neither is physical,
Sure.
but both exist, right?
Sure.
Okay. Can you think of anything that is not God and is not an idea that is more similar to God? And like, let's take angels and stuff like that out of it too, because that's like kind of a cop out, right? But anything else that you can think of that both you and I would agree exists that's more like God than an idea is?
You can almost see the wheels turning in my head here as I was kind of composing this question, and I thought of like a counterexample, and I was like, wait, like angels and other stuff, like I don't want him to just throw that at me. And I was like, or that, right? Just modified the question on the fly to kind of accept out the other thing that I had just thought of that didn't matter, wasn't relevant to the question, but would have been a nice zinger for him to come back with, just kind of eliminated as I'm making the question.
Anything that's
The
more like
female
God
orgasm.
I hope that's not true for this guy. That is something real and physical, and women will tell you about it, and they'll tell you when when it does manifest itself in the physical world. But if it is only remaining an idea for you, then that's quite unfortunate.
There's more like God. It's not an idea.
Yeah.
But it's similar. I don't think I can't really name any.
Okay.
So this moment here is kind of like, it's what we would call a cut, right? It's a very soft, and I don't even make a big deal out of it at the time, right? But like, I mean, so he's just admitted that in his mind he can't really think of anything that is more similar to God than an idea, and that is suggestive of the premise that think of it as evidence in support of the premise that God may just be an idea and nothing more than that. And that's something that, like, if this were a court battle, right, that you would kind of just tuck away, and then that would get brought out much later in a completely different context, right? But just a little thing, just a little notch. that probably went by him unconsidered as we move forward.
And
Because
so, in
we
terms of whether or not an
don't really
idea
believe there's
has
a lot of things
thoughts
that
or
are like that.
feelings or anything like that, you wouldn't think that an idea has thoughts or feelings of its own, independent of the mind that's thinking it, would you?
No, because by definition, ideas are derived from the mind.
Right, right.
And in a different context, that statement would probably not be welcomed by him. I mean, if he were more famous and we were, the kind of people who played stuff like that back ad nauseum, he probably would not like that.
And so, is there something like, so it seems to me, and I think we've explored this again from another direction. It seems to me that the way that you decide that God has thoughts and feelings of his own is different than the way that you decide that anything else that you can think of has thoughts or feelings of its own. Isn't that fair?
I don't get how you come up with that conclusion.
See, now if I had to speculate here, and I do, what I think is going on is that he doesn't understand really why I'm asking that question and why I think it's significant, but he can tell that I do think it's significant, so he's kind of just disinclined to agree with me, right? But I don't think he really understands why.
Well, okay, fine. Tell me this. What is it that you can think of that you determine has thoughts and feelings of its own, that you use the same methodology that you use with God?
Well, again, well, you're asking. Wait, can you repeat your question?
Yeah. I'll simplify it.
See, he's distracted at this point. He's trying to understand the chess game, and he's trying to, think about this question in an abstract way, and, he's just kind of grinding to a halt. So that's why I simplified it. I said, look, I'm going to give you a concrete question to focus on. Just focus on my concrete question. And he's going, okay, I guess that's something I can do and I'll be safe. And so I get an answer.
For you. How do you determine that God has thoughts and feelings of his own?
How do I determine? Like, how do I know that?
Yeah.
Well, through scripture.
Okay. Is there anything else that you determine has thoughts and feelings of its own through scripture?
Well, I mean, no, but that doesn't mean that.
That's all I wanted. Thank you.
I mean, but
I'm done. Thanks, guys.
how I.
And before he can realize it, the final wall has come up on this box and he's nailed himself into it, and he's so confused. He's like, what just happened to me? And I'm just kind of, I don't know. I enjoy that. I enjoy that immensely. I don't know.
Get wrecked, nerd. What does that do? Like, just because I come to a I guess knowledge in a different way doesn't make that thing not true. I don't get.
Yeah. So what he's pointing to is what we call special pleading, right? And this means that you're determining you're.
And this was the most fun part of the debate for me, because I just get to sit back, and now everybody else in the group comes in and explains to this guy what happened. And it was so great to see, because like, as a lawyer, you go and you do these things, and you never really get to see, the person's sort of reaction, because like, if this was in real life, what would happen is like, that's the end. We shut it down, I pack up my briefcase, and I go home, and I never get to see his reaction. And it never gets to be like, I never get to have somebody appreciate, that it has happened and realize kind of what has been done. It's always kind of like, I know what I did, and maybe my client does if I explain it to him, but like, nobody else really kind of gets it. And like, the case like goes well after that, but like, it doesn't really kind of see the light of day. And so it's really nice to just watch all these guys kind of come in and go like, oh, we saw what was happening. Like, we understand what just happened to you. You obviously did not, but let us explain it to you. And it's just kind of like, I just kind of sat back and I was like this, like just with like popcorn, kind of metaphorically going like, oh, this is nice. This is nice.
Using a different methodology, right, to determine what a mind is. And because it's a deity, right, and you label it a deity outside space-time, outside universal constraints, then you will now make an intellectual bias statement that will always make it true. And say, well, I can't just comport like my reality to a deity. I have to go outside of reality to do those things. And that's the special pleading, where you won't do that with any other gods, except for the God that you believe in.
So, Mary, were you citing something as an exception to a general or universal principle without justifying the special exception?
No, well, again, I don't. So,
I think he had you admit that just a second ago, right? I'm gonna put. I'm gonna copy paste.
I think he was trying to. I don't know if he was trying to.
That's what he was doing. He was just showing that you're special pleading. So
let him respond.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna post it in the side chat for you real quick.
No, I don't think I'm special pleading. I think that he was pretty much asking me when we first started this conversation, like, how do I even know that God has a mind? I think he was trying to disprove whether. I think he was trying to prove that.
No, Mari, that's not what he said. So what he was saying, Mari, hold on. So
see, what happened to Mari is that he was guarding the wrong goal. He thought that I was going to try and get him to admit that he had no basis for believing that God had a mind. But I wasn't going there. I know he has a basis for believing God has a mind, and I know that it's his faith in the Bible. And so he was, that's what he was protecting. That's what he was guarding. And what he didn't realize was that I was going for something that was a little bit more modest, a little bit more reasonable, but in this context, still very devastating. And he's suffering some severe cognitive dissonance in, coming to terms with the fact that he has given an admission that, is very damaging to him. And he is really going to struggle with even understanding that he was scored upon, because he was like, no, I was guarding the goal. Like, yeah, you were. Not the one I scored on.
What is the underlying reasoning? Like, why do you think this way?
Mari, what he was saying to you was the fact that you establish minds under certain preconditions of what you determine a mind to be, but you don't establish those same things to your God concept. So by definition, that would be special pleading, because you're just prejuxtaposing that this God concept has a mind, but you haven't determined that in the same way that you would determine other things with minds. You're just saying it does because it does.
No, look in the side chat and just read that real fast and just say if that's what you did or what you did not do.
No, I still don't think. I don't get how I'm special pleading when I said
read the side
the
chat.
way that we established.
So
no, because
Mari,
the way that we established something.
Why don't you read the definition of special pleading in the side chat real quick and just see if that's what you were doing?
Like, read it in
I
the
don't
side
think that's
chat,
what I'm reading it. That's not what I did.
Okay, so why is that?
I don't see how I did it. I don't see how I did it.
Mari, just show for a second, right? So that's how I interpreted what you were saying, because it seemed to me that you were using like a sort of a specific form of epistemological analysis, like how you came to a conclusion about whether or not that chair had a mind, right? The process that you used for establishing that's not the same process you used for doing that with a god, right? So you seem to have these different epistemological processes for how you determine that belief when it's a chair versus it's a god. But you're saying it's not special pleading. So explain to me how you're not using different processes when it comes to those conclusions.
Well, I personally think it's...
No, yeah, I don't think I'm special pleading. I mean, the principle is the same.
So this is one of the reasons that I say that it's a really good idea to understand the logical fallacies, and being able to recognize the logical fallacies is great, but calling out the labels and telling somebody that this or that is a logical fallacy is not always the best approach, or in my opinion is not usually the best approach. It's far better to just show that they are committing that logical fallacy, because as soon as you tell somebody that they are committing a logical fallacy, they're going to start trying to find reasons why they are not committing that logical fallacy. And they're going to look at that fallacy, they're potentially even going to look it up because we're all in front of computers, and then they're going to start trying to modify their arguments so that it's harder to fit within that fallacy. So it's far more effective to just say, like, you mean this, and you mean this, and you mean this, and you have all the boxes right there, and you check them all off, but you don't tell that person that those are the boxes that correspond to a logical fallacy and that they are making a logical fallacy. You just confirm that, in fact, they are making a logical fallacy. And I think there is potentially some utility to kind of letting them in on the game, maybe at the very end, but probably not in a circumstance where you give them the opportunity to try and rewrite history. The other reason that I don't love calling out logical fallacies is that then the other thing that they'll do is they'll say, well, no, that they'll start arguing with you about whether or not in fact you've checked all the boxes and whether or not in fact that thing is, or qualifies as this or that logical fallacy, and whether or not what they're saying is or is not fallacious. And it's not for them to say, it's for the viewer to say. So it's not useful to argue with them about that. It's not an argument that I would be particularly interested in having. So I typically don't have it, right? I just explain, if I'm going to do it at all, I'll just explain the reason why it's a logical fallacy without giving the name, and just say it's one rule for you and it's one rule for everybody else. It's a this is the rule for everything except for this special thing, and it's very special, and nothing else applies. It's a different category, right? It's got its own special rules. And they'll say, yeah, right. And they'll go, okay, cool, right? And then, the audience can kind of go, okay, yeah, that's one rule for you, one rule for me. That's probably not very logical. And then that's the end of it. And then you just tie it up for a bow, with a bow for the audience in your closing. And in your closing, you say, so, the evidence was and the argument was that he thinks this, and this, and let me let you in on a little secret. Here's a logical fallacy, and here are the elements of the fallacy, and those slot into those elements here. Bing, 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 bing. So what he's saying is a logical fallacy, and you shouldn't agree with it. And that's in your closing, not in the argument.
I said earlier.
I agree.
Principle is the same. The reason why I'm not special pleading what I...
He's going to twist in the wind for a while now here, and these guys are just going to have some fun crucifying this guy. And if you want to see the whole thing, then you should go check out Taco's channel. Like I said, the link is in the description. He's good. The guy's good, and you should definitely check out and subscribe to his channel. But go there, watch the whole thing. But I'm going to speed up here because this video is really supposed to be more of a companion to that video, where we focus more on my commentary than kind of replaying the entire thing.
How I determine something has a mind, there's a different way I can come to that knowledge. I determine something has a mind. No, he was asking me earlier, how I determine something has a mind. Also, he was asking me, what would be the preconditions? I said something being alive. I said something expressing thoughts and feelings. But the way that I came about that knowledge, or I guess truth, I was basically saying I come to know that God has thoughts and feelings and he's alive, not through my observation because I didn't see God, but I was saying through scripture. Whereas I know you have a mind because I talk to you, right? I observe. It doesn't mean I'm special pleading just because I came about that knowledge in a different way. I don't get how to special pleading.
So, Mari, the thing is that you have to replay back what you just said. The epistemological way of you understanding of how you establish something that has a mind and does not have a mind is by witnessing through observation that thing has a mind through it being alive. But you establish that you cannot know and do not witness God itself beyond the scripture. So you don't have the justification to saying that God has a mind and feelings because you have not witnessed it in the same way that you haven't witnessed the ideas of any other thing that is metaphysical. But you establish minds. Hold on, I'm not done yet. You still establish what minds are through observation, but you don't do that for God. That is special pleading.
No, again, okay, let me read the definition again to make sure.
Mari, here's the thing. If I
wait, he said he's going to read real quick. He's trying to process.
But yeah, with that being said, I still don't get it how, because again, I apply the same principles to God.
Here's the thing, right? Look at you use sense data in order to determine whether or not it has a mind. Now, if I give you a bed, do you also use sense data in order to determine whether or not it has a mind?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay, so what if I give you a rock? I would assume you also use sense data.
Sure.
Whether or not it has a mind. All right, I give you a lamp, I give you a basketball, I give you a telephone, I give you a star, I give you the Milky Way. I can give you a million different things, and consistently, what you will use to determine whether or not it has a mind is sense data. Then all of a sudden, when it comes to this entity that we call God, in contradiction to how you've evaluated from mine a million billion times before. All of a sudden, you're using a separate epistemological framework, right? Does that not sound like special reading to you?
No, because the way I even come to know God in the first place is through that epistemological framework. Because I mean, I believe one day that's because the argument that I guess Mr. Anderson was trying to establish is already, I guess, it's not that you believe that God exists, but the argument that they're establishing is, I think it's be assuming that
Mari,
I guess God exists.
Do you have anything you want to add on this conversation?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. Do you want anything more into the conversation?
Well, I mean, you know what? I think Mario's been a really good sport here. I certainly have things that I could say if he wanted to continue to engage, but I want him to feel comfortable enough to come back. I don't want him to feel like he's being dogpiled.
Why,
so, Mario,
dude?
it's really up to you.
Destroy him.
Well,
what if he never comes? What if this is the only time he comes in? This is your opportunity to destroy him.
I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back.
You want me to do that?
Yeah, he's saying that now.
All right. You know,
like,
I'll ask him a couple more questions if he wants. Sure.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I call sewing things back up. So, he's tried to wiggle out, and in all of that stuff that you just heard, like, he was, saying things where he was trying to equivocate and sort of, like soften his answers. And, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to kind of get him to restate all the things so that now he's trapped right back where he started, and all of his efforts were in vain. And then we're just going to end it there.
Well, to be honest,
so my question is, so you'd agree with me that, I mean, there was a distinction that you were drawing when you were speaking with that other gentleman between, your holy book, which I assume is the Bible, and the holy books of, any other given religion, in that, one of them you're going to believe, and the other ones you're going to be a little bit skeptical of. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's because there's an element of faith in believing the things that are in your holy book, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you agree with me that that is different. That's specifically that element of faith in terms of the existence of the mind of God, that you only apply that to determining the existence of the mind of God. You don't take anything else on faith, right? I think that's kind of where we're at. Yeah. And I think that's honest. So thank you for your honesty. So all I'm suggesting is that for Mario, there's a difference in terms of the way that he determines whether or not something has a mind when it comes to God and when it comes to anything else in the world. In that for God, there's an element of faith, but for everything else, there isn't. He's more skeptical of those things. But for God, it's different, and there's an element of faith. That's all I'm suggesting. And I think he's agreed to that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna head out though.
Oh, he sounds so defeated. Oh, you poor bastard. Well, you know what? It was fun, and maybe we'll get Darth Dawkins next time. But, this guy was a good sport. I mean, he was honest, at least. I think he gave forthright answers. It just, to the extent that I don't know. He was planning on being evasive, but he was not evasive about the thing that turned out mattered. So, thanks for the conversation, and I look forward to our next one.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, have a good one.